Welcome, gamers, to this episode of The Tops. The Top is the show where we take the top 5 of the topic at hand and we give you our list from 5 to number 1. And today's topic is the top 5 games of 2023. My name is Craig Perales. Joining me is Mandrew Montemayor. I gotta ask before we get started, how you feeling strong about? You feeling strong, my friend, about your list?
I'm very happy with it. As I was writing it down, when I really thought about it, I mixed up my numbers from how I originally had them and moved some stuff around. Plus, we had some honorable mentions that after I was thinking about them, I'm like, this was just a really, really good year.
Yeah.
That it sucks to have to cut some things, because that doesn't mean, you might maybe ask me on a different day, and maybe one of those could have been 5 or 4 or something like that. So, either way, just a very strong year, and I'm glad for what we got this year.
Yeah, it was really a tough year to kind of boil it down to what were the top 5 best. And again, there were so many good games. And one of the beauties that I like doing this with Andrew is that we have very different lists. So technically, you're getting 10 games ordered down from 5 to 1. So guys, if you are watching us on YouTube right now, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the share button, and ring the notification bell. And if you guys are interested in following us on any of our social media, our Linktree link will be in the description. So one of the rules that we have before we get going, so just to put it in context for you guys, is these lists are based on games that we played and actually beat. So nothing on this list is anything that we started playing and never finished. So unfortunately, for me anyway, because I did start playing Baldur's Gate 3, I just didn't get a chance to beat it. So I always like throwing it out there before we get started. Baldur's Gate 3 won't be on there, but that doesn't mean the game isn't the shit. It's number 1 across a lot of people's scales, and if I did get to beat it, I'm sure Baldur's Gate 3 would have made my list, but I do just got to put it out there that these are games that me and Andrew actually finished, and I always think that's a fair rule, right?
Yeah, not to mention the other one too. These are all games that came out this year, so released.
Yeah, so guys, we're going to get started. We're going to go from 5 to 1 of our top 5 games of 2023. Andrew, why don't you go ahead and start with your number 5, my friend?
My number 5 for this year was Starfield. I actually really enjoyed this game. It came out in September on the 6th, again, developed and published by Bethesda. I think maybe a big problem for this game that maybe turned a lot of people off, and I remember talking to you about it because I actually ended up playing it first, is unlike some of the Fallouts of the Skyrims, it had a slower start than those other games do, than throwing you just like kind of straight into everything. But I feel like once this game, like once you give it a chance and it takes off and you really start understanding the exploration and everything, it really takes off. And I actually thought it was a really good game. I had a good time with it. That's not to say that it didn't have its flaws. I actually really enjoyed the factions, especially one of my favorite ones, the Ryujin Industries, which is just pretty much corporate espionage. I felt like this was really my first one to where, my first Bethesda style game, to where I actually didn't really do too much combat. Like, obviously I had to fight like animals and like aliens and creatures and stuff. But as far as anything else goes, I found myself talking my way out of every situation. And I don't know that I was able to do that as much before in the other games. I always felt like no matter what, something always came to a head to where you have to fight no matter what. And there's some scenes where you do. But when you come to like this, I don't want to spoil anything, when you come to this penultimate decision later on, you can literally just convince not that they're a bad guy, but obviously their ideals are different than yours. You can convince them just to give up and be like, oh, you know what, you're right, and just totally skip the fight. And I thought that was a really cool thing too. I actually like the space travel. I know some people had a problem with it, but I think people's ideas were maybe skewed to what this was going to be, and maybe that's where we're different, because I know we maybe liked it a little bit more, is we were afraid it was going to be so big and so open and this big grand wild thing, where we wanted something more bite-sized. And I mean, bite-sized is kind of maybe the wrong word, but compared to what people's grand scope of what they thought,
bigger than Outer Worlds, but not as crazy as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and so I felt like this was bigger than Outer Worlds, but not too big to where I'm like, dude, this is just too much. Like, I don't want to do this. There's a lot of planets and stuff that you can do, but I like that, I don't have to spend 3 hours walking from one end to the other. It's not going to take me 30 minutes to fly from one planet to the next. I don't know why people are wanting that. Personally, it wasn't what I was wanting, so I think it fit me a lot better. And again, my final note is that it does have its faults, just like all Bethesda games do, and they have been doing a good job patching it and getting through. So I think that this is a game in retrospect people might like a lot more, or it could be another case of like Cyberpunk, not as bad, but it did launch with some of its flaws, but give it a few months to a year and maybe they'll just have this massive overhaul to really capture that vision of what they really wanted.
Nice. If you do like doing missions where you don't actually have to fight, I don't know if you ever played Greedfall. Was on my list a couple years ago, but I have Greedfall if you ever want to play it, and it is one of those type of games where you can build your character if you want to be a fighter or like a stealth talker, and you can do that. So if that's another game, I think you would dig that if that's what you liked a lot about Starfield.
I don't know why, but lately I feel like that's been my thing. Is I do make myself strong enough to like fight people, but I like to talk my way out of situations. I feel like you see a lot more dialogue and you get a lot more story out of this stuff than just like, all right, man, have at you.
Have at thee. Awesome. So my number 5, guys, is Hi-Fi Rush. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Hi-Fi Rush is a rhythm-based action game developed by Tango Gameworks and published by Bethesda Softworks for Windows and the Xbox Series X and S platform.
Another Bethesda.
Yeah, I was just noticing that. I guess our number 5s are both Bethesda. It was announced on January 25th, 2023, and was released worldwide on the same day. Now, what I really liked about this game is that it obviously the shadow drop was pretty amazing. I talked about it in one of our other videos, but it was announced that I believe the developer direct, again, early on in January, and it just came out of nowhere from a studio that we weren't kind of thinking it was going to come out, because Tango Gameworks is coming off of doing a game like Evil Within, and it's a rhythm-based game. Those games have a certain place for people to play, but that's kind of a risky business, right? If you're going to do something that's a genre that not everybody likes to play, it's going to be hard to kind of grab that audience. And for me, it instantly did. And when you play this kid, Chai, who's this 25-year-old kid with this disabled right arm, the concept in the beginning is that there's this company called Vandalay Technologies, which is a great shout out to
Art Vandalay.
Yeah, Art Vandalay. And what they do is they do these cybernetic implants. And when he goes to get his he's always walking around with like his MP3 player, like his music device, and it ends up falling into his like when he's getting his arm done, it falls into his chest. So then it has this whole concept of that's why he's able to kind of feel the beat and feel the rhythm. And you find out, the storyline is that the Vandalay Technologies is using all these implants with people that they have on them to start doing like mind control and everything. So that's the kind of the reason that you got to kind of stop them from taking over the world. But other than that, it had really cool characters. Not only was Chai somebody that I really liked playing, but when you meet Bob and you meet Peppermint and Macaron, these are all really fun characters that you meet in various different ways. And then when they join your team, like when you're doing combat, you can kind of switch out who you want to play with and who can do these double team, triple team moves and things like that. So yeah, the combat was really cool because instead of just being like a hardcore action slash type of game, it kind of incorporates that rhythm timing, which again I'm not really good at, but I felt like this game wasn't that hard. I mean, there's obviously levels of difficulty, but I was able to play it and thoroughly enjoy it without feeling overwhelmed with it. And again, unlike its predecessor game like Evil Within, it's super bright, it's colorful, it's full of energy. It's got this kind of comic book vibe to where when you're going through these cutscenes, they're kind of done in these panels. You get this secret base that allows you to go back and look at unlockables. With the different characters that you unlock throughout the game, it actually encourages you to replay levels once you beat it. And like in the beginning, you won't be able to open certain doors because you didn't have that character unlocked. But now when you replay it, you'll have everybody. And so there's a lot of stuff you can go back and go do. So for me, it was a game that I didn't think I was going to like, but after playing it on the Game Pass, it was super fun, bright, colorful, and I had a lot of fun. And I recommend anybody who was on the fence about it to definitely give Hi-Fi Rush a shot. So that was my number 5, Andrew. That moves us into number 4.
My number 4 was Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It came out on the 12th, and again, published by your boys at Ninty. Now, some people say this is a negative. I personally didn't play Breath of the Wild, so I ended up really loving the map because it is the same map from Breath of the Wild. So it was all new and fresh to me with the addition of like the underworld. And I thought the map was so well done with how much I loved it, and maybe this will be a positive for me playing it in reverse order, that I actually want to go back and play Breath of the Wild after playing this thing. I had a great time playing it. I personally like the art style. I think it's beautiful for like a Zelda game. Like, I thought it was a good style to go with. Ganon in this new version is actually really, really good. I really liked him as a villain to where I didn't feel like, okay, this is just the same generic Ganon kind of showing up, doing his thing, and that's it. From the intro, like right away though, I felt like I haven't played a Zelda since I think Wind Waker, and except for I did the
Link's Awakening?
Link's Awakening.
I was going to say, we both did that, which was awesome.
Yeah, remake, but that's not in, like, the same vein. That's a remake. That's not, like, a new game. So I haven't played a new Zelda game since Wind Waker, and this totally just brought me back into the fold of, like, right away, this is what a Zelda game is like. This is an experience, and as I'm playing, I'm like, man, you know, I thought I'm playing other games that maybe kind of capture that feeling, and I was completely wrong. I'm like, this is what it feels like to play Legend of Zelda. Like, it just got me right away from the beautiful soundtrack. I actually really liked a lot of some of the things that they put in here. Like, the new powers was the big thing for this one. Or, I don't want to say, like, gimmick, but what's supposed to be new. My favorite one actually ended up being something that they had put in there as more like something that was easier for them when they were testing the game. They're like, hey, this works so good, let's just make it a power. And that's like the ascend ability. So you could be at the bottom of a mountain or the bottom of a dungeon, and as long as there's nothing that would be like blocking you from the top, you could just warp Link straight through from the bottom of somewhere to the top. So it just made traversing so much easier. It seemed like they really put a lot of quality of life changes into here. And I know people don't like the crafting system here and upgrading it. I personally didn't mind it. I like the idea of it, but I do want to put an asterisk next to that, because when I played it, you could still do the duplication glitch. So I didn't make myself like crazy overpowered, but I could kill one once I killed one of the stronger enemies and I had something that I needed 5 of, I was just able to produce it and then upgrade my armor versus sitting there killing 20 of them hoping to get like 2. There was a point where I was hunting down a specific guy, and I think I had to kill like 4 of them before I even got the one piece that I needed. So I could definitely understand how that could get frustrating, but again, I put that asterisk next to it because I was duping stuff. And I don't know why they don't leave that in the game again, because this is something single player, so it's not hurting anybody. And for anyone who wants something that's maybe like an easy mode without putting an easy mode in, that, you know, I felt like that would be something that would be perfectly fine. And maybe someone like you was like, oh, you know what, that turned me off. But now that I know that something like that dupe glitch is in there, that might be easier for me to get into. And now I don't feel like I'm just chasing this thing forever.
Yeah, the grind is what throws me off, man.
And so, other than that, I mean, that game, it definitely brought me back into the fold on Zelda, that I'm all in on whatever the next one's going to be, and I think I am going to go back and do Breath of the Wild as soon as I get a chance.
Nice, excellent. My number 4, guys, is Hogwarts Legacy. Hogwarts Legacy is a 2023 action role-playing game developed by Avalanche Software and published by Warner Brother Games under its Portkey Games label. The game is part of the Wizarding World franchise, taking place a century prior to the events of the chronicled in the Harry Potter novels. And I did want to dive... Oh, you know what? I think I got rid of it in here. Yeah, Hogwarts Legacy, to me, was a game that I think it just delivered on all fronts. And I think a lot of people were kind of iffy on how it was going to come out, because not only is this a Harry Potter game, but people were going to be like, okay, well, what's the look going to be like? How's the gameplay going to be? Is it going to be fun for more than just kids? And the answer was that I think it delivered on all of those. So not only was the combat very impressive, and I say it every time we talk about it, it's super fast and it's super fluid. And as you level up, you actually get to learn new spells and new potions, and it kind of encourages you to kind of mix and match all of them, because certain enemies are going to be weak against certain things. And I believe there's 8 different spots you can put for your spells and your potions out of the possible 20 to 25 that you can do. So it is super customizable in terms of how you want to build your character. But I think the biggest thing that this game has to offer, which was the biggest question on everybody's mind, was the exploration, which in my mind was the best part of it, because not only are you going to go through Hogwarts, which they did an amazing job of recapturing it and actually finding all the secrets in the dungeons and all the rooms and all the different houses that you can go to, but then you have things like Hogsmeade, you have all the like the Scottish islands and stuff that you could travel around. So the biggest question I had was like going to be, how big is this game? You know, what can you actually go do? And the answer is that there's a lot, and it's done extremely well. Now, I know a lot of people were having issues, especially because the Switch port came out a lot later, but everybody playing on last gen were having issues with some of the loading in and things like that and how things were looking. But as someone that is playing on the Xbox Series X, it was fantastic. Now, the other thing that stands out is Hogwarts Legacy. How compared to Harry Potter was this going to be? And like it says, it's centuries before that. But the thing that I like the best is that it's a very mature storyline. It starts you off in your 5th year, so you're not a little kid coming in trying to figure out what's what. It's you already understand that there's I don't want to call them Death Eaters because they're not Death Eaters yet, but there are dark wizards. There are heavy consequences. You are dealing with death and potential. And one of the cool things is that it does open up the different houses. You can learn the killing curses and things like that. You can go Slytherin or Gryffindor, any house that you want to do. And the fact that they introduced a new villain that wasn't just a dark wizard, it was this kind of evil goblin named Ranrock, I thought was a very cool direction that they went for, that gives it its own life and breath away from just being a part of a spin-off of Harry Potter. So at the end, I got to say the scope of it all just felt awesome. If it's something that you've been looking at playing and are interested in getting into, it's a perfect excuse to go back into the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. I almost 100%ed it. I think I have 3 achievements left. 2 of them are for just starting the game over, because there's an achievement for doing each house. I think I still need to do Slytherin and Hufflepuff, which is like a 2-hour intro, so it's been slowing me down. And then the last one is finding all the secrets that are in Hogwarts, which in total I think is over 120 or something like that. I think I'm at half. But I do want to point out that, which was pretty interesting, that Hogwarts Legacy, despite all of its controversy, whatever side you lean on, with all the stuff that was happening with JK, the game actually did come out to be, as of right now, the year's not over, the #1 selling game of 2023, beating out Call of Duty. Me and Andrew were talking off camera that I think this is the first time that this has happened in like over a decade, that a game that wasn't Call of Duty was the best selling. And out of all the games it could have been, I was super happy and impressed that it was a game as Hogwarts Legacy. Not only do I think it earned it because it's a great game, but that IP alone just lends itself to everybody, whether you're young or old that wants to play Harry Potter. This game not only delivered it, but it was spectacularly and well done, and I hope one day you get back to it.
I want to say, for a game, like, literally for the longest time when we were looking at it, this was a game that people were like, I don't know if it's gonna be good. What they're showing, it didn't kind of show too great, and it came out, and it's actually a beautiful game too. It looks really good, and it ran perfectly fine.
And it's just so big and spacious, and that's what kind of blew my mind. Just all the things you could do in it, it really kind of leans into this RPG element, because you can build your own kind of hidden base in the Room of Requirement. You can start building your different kind of plants and potions and things like that. And you do get gear, so I'm curious what they're going to do in the next one, because it came out of the gate doing a lot of things correct, right? There was nothing really in there that I was like, man, this is kind of a bummer. I wish they kind of changed that, besides maybe the gear. But if you take everything that it had coming out of the gate and just kind of improve on that, I'm super looking forward to whatever they're going to call Hogwarts Legacy 2. So I'm super excited for that. So that was my number 4, guys. Let's move into number 3. Andrew, what do you got?
My number 3 is Mortal Kombat 1. That launched this year on September 19th, and of course, as always, developed by NetherRealm Studios and published by Warner Brothers Games. Now, this game was pretty much another reboot in Mortal Kombat, so I kind of wasn't really sure how it was going to go, because they already rebooted it with 2011's, and then it's not necessarily a soft reboot, but you kind of have a worlds collide thing with a future and past with Mortal Kombat 11. So I wasn't really sure where this story was going to go. I actually really love the story. I thought it was really good, and kind of seeing Liu Kang's new world and his new timeline that he's trying to build, and what he's done with it, and the fact that no matter how much you can try to do without... I like the idea that he takes, where I can only create things and try to set things in motion and in position, but I'm not here to directly influence people, good or bad, or make them just do things. He doesn't try to be a god. He just sets things up and tries to hope for the best and hope that people find their way towards peace. But I thought this game did particularly a really good job of making even classic villains like Shang Tsung and Quan Chi, seeing like fresh new iterations of them. Shang Tsung, actually, whoever the new voice actor is for this guy, was amazing. He ended up being my absolute favorite. I thought he was so good. It's a beautiful game. This game actually looks really, really good. I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. I really like, too, the cameo fighting system. I'm not like a big fighting guy when it comes to games. Mortal Kombat's the one that I always play, or Injustice when they do it, and that's just because we do it for the story. I think if I was really into fighting games and I like to play online and do all these different things, I would actually probably put this game higher up on a list for me. That's how good it was. But I really like the idea that you can have the cameos come in, so that way you don't have this big thing of 40 fighters that you're trying to balance. You pick this core group of maybe like 20, I think there's like 26 fighters, and then you have 26 cameos that are there to back you up, and then that creates more variations for how you want to fight. So you can even have like a classic Scorpion or a classic Sub-Zero there to back you up. You have like Sonya, so that way she's not directly out of the game. So you have all these other people there that to help you. I also really appreciated what they did for people that are considered like jobbers, like what they did with Baraka, or even my favorite Syzoth, aka Reptile, what they did to give his character more depth and more life and how much of a big part he is in the story. And then I think my final thing that I really loved about this game was after I beat it, one, the ending was great, and I'm really excited to kind of see where it's going to go in the future, is there's another little side mode if you want to play it called Invasions, where you're almost kind of like on like a little game board, and you just go through and you fight people, and you do it under different circumstances. So you might fight someone who maybe they have like power armor and you have to break it. Other times it's like raining meteors out of the sky. So there's just different variants to like each fight to kind of make it different, but it extends the story further, because like the first section is about a Scorpion from a different timeline coming through and pretty much trying to find a world where him and his clan weren't like decimated, and he's just smashing everyone along the way. And then since then they've done a different timeline, or not a different, like a different variation of that same board, different places with Sub-Zero, with Natara, who have different stories. So it's almost adding more length to, you know, what the main story is. So I thought this game was phenomenal.
Yeah, MK1 was a lot of fun. So that's Andrew's number 3. My number 3 is a game called Bramble the Mountain King, which is a 2023 action-adventure video game developed by Dim Frost Studios and published by Merge Games. Players control a young boy named Ollie who attempts to rescue his kidnapped sister, Lillimore, from mythological creatures. It's on every platform, and it came out on April 27th, 2023. And I just want to dive into a little bit more of the gameplay. So, a child named Ollie discovers his sister is missing and takes off to find her. Bramble the Mountain King is an adventure game based on Scandinavian folklore. It is played from a third-person perspective and has elements of horror games. Ollie must traverse locales common to fairy tales. Travel is generally linear, and to continue, players must occasionally solve puzzles or jump across platforms, as in platform games. There are also occasional action sequences where players must engage frightening monsters in boss fights. Now, they really kind of go light on that it's a horror game and it's frightening. It is very, very dark game. Like, I wouldn't say it's just for any kid to pick up, because it does kind of remind me a lot of the game. Did you ever play Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons?
Yes.
Okay, so it kind of reminds me of that. It's this kind of this family kind of is trying to stick together, and they're trying to help each other out and find each other. But this just shows how great the indie games are still kind of coming out, and they're fantastic. And that if you can get the good ones like this one, they can go toe to toe with AAA games. So yeah, I do want to point out that the folktale and the folklore and the fairy tale aspect of it is what I really, really enjoyed. But again, it is very dark and very depressing. There's a lot of death, and with that aesthetic, it kind of changes. So it's really cool to see them go from like a forest to a swamp into different types of tundra. And one of the coolest things is at the end, it has these different, I mean, obviously a lot of it's platforming and jumping, and the stories kind of is what's moving you along, and you meet different people that kind of help you, or certain people that you need to avoid. But there are, I think, about 7 to 8 boss fights in this game. I meant to show you this one before we started playing, but one of my favorites was this boss, I believe it's called Karrhaxan, which is Karrhaxan. And it's about, you're getting to this point where these girls were like sacrificing their babies to this witch, and she was actually like killing them. So in this part of the game, you're trying to run and reach it to a certain point before she ends up killing the baby, which is gnarly. But in the boss fight, it's like you'll hear these babies will pop up in the water, and you'll hear them start crying, and it's kind of like distracting you, and then you'll start hearing it like somebody come up in the water, and you gotta like flash your light on them, and this big witch like jumps out. So I really want to show you some of the boss fights, because I think you'd be really impressed by it.
It sounds cool.
Yeah, it's not that long of a game, and again, there's a reason why I wanted to put this up here, because I know Geno played it, and I think it might be in his top 5 as well, if not like his number 1 or 2, but and it's on the Game Pass if you guys are interested in checking it out. So I wanted to put this on here to make sure that if you haven't heard of it, definitely check it out, because I think indies deserve to be more recognizable, and this is a nice platform for me to at least put this game on your guys' radar. It's very beautiful to look at, even though it is a very dark and creepy aesthetic. There's not really too much I can get into without spoiling anything, because half of what's cool about it is learning what you're doing in each of these chapters. But I will say the puzzle solving isn't too hard, so it is something that like you have to do, but it's not overwhelming. But the character and the storyline is what shines, and these boss fights are all extremely memorable. So if you guys get a chance to check it out, definitely go do so. So with that down, guys, we're moving into our final two. So Andrew, what was your second best game of 2023?
My second best game was actually my favorite game for most of the year, and catch me on the right day and I might say it, but I put it at number 2, and that's Resident Evil 4 Remake. Now that came out March 24th of this year, developed and published, of course, by Capcom, and I mean, this game is a juggernaut. How do you remake a game that literally redefined third-person shooting and influenced games for years to come? Somehow they did it. It's so good. I think they did a great job, first of all, at what they've been doing. They've been taking these games that they've been remaking and bringing them into that modern horror and story of like what 2 is, to where they still keep that camp and that horror, but it is more horror focused. And so they did a really good job at kind of aligning this with what they did with 2 and 3 Remake. The gameplay feels amazing. It feels better than ever, especially now with the fact that you can actually move while you're reloading. Your feet just aren't planted there. Your feet aren't just planted there while you're shooting. So it doesn't, and as crazy as it sounds, because I was thinking like, all right, well, how do you're going to make it like this, and then it's just going to be too easy. Because if you did that in the classic Resident Evil 4, you would just mop up everything. It's still just as hard, just as challenging as ever, depending on which difficulty you're playing on, of course, too. And then they've even added a new knife mechanic that I thought sounded dumb at first, too, that your knife has like a durability, but you can use it to parry attacks, to reverse things, especially if like the chainsaw guy's coming at you and he's about to kill you. You can use your knife to like block him, and then if it's strong enough, you'll still have it. If not, it'll break, and then maybe you got to use another one. I actually ended up really liking that aspect, and then you can reinforce the knife. It does bring back that classic like in 4 where you're upgrading your guns, how much you can carry, how much damage the guns do, and there's a lot of choice of different weapons to use here, and I always really like that about that. I personally think that this beats the original for me, and that was one of my all-time favorite games since that one came out. I know one of the biggest things, especially with the original one, even though being so loved, is that people hated the escorting sessions of Ashley, because it is a pain, especially when you go back and play. It does feel dated with that. It's so hard because you accidentally shoot her, she'll die. Whereas in this one, you don't have to worry about her health. She doesn't have health. If she takes too much damage, she kind of just falls down, and you do have to pick her up. But what they've done with her character and bringing her into a modern take where she does need help, but she, obviously she's not a badass, but she can kind of hold her own like a little bit. And by the way, too, the new BA and the new direction that they've taken Ashley is really good. She's totally bae, and definitely one of my favorite parts of the game. I really liked what they did with the character, especially with they've changed a lot of the things, like especially I'm not gonna say how it happens in this one, but in the old one, Ashley would get split because she backs up to a wall that happens to have like 3 traps that come out, and then the wall spins around and like they take her. And it's like, well, it's like so obvious from a mile away. Whereas in this one, it happens different, and it's a lot of things that they've done, they've changed to make more sense, so it doesn't seem as silly. But they do keep that campiness there as far as like the dialogue. Like Leon's like, "Where'd everybody go? Bingo!" Like that's in there because that's a line that people just love. I think that when they redid this game, they did it just like the other ones. It has all the heart there, and you can tell that they just put everything into this game. I definitely feel it's a must-play for anyone out there. It does still keep the action in it, but it is leaned into a lot more of the horror, whereas the old one's pretty much just a shoot fest.
Shoot fest. So, excellent. My number 2, guys, is Final Fantasy 16, which is a 2023 action role-playing game developed and published by Square Enix. The 16th main installment in the Final Fantasy series, released for the PS5 with DLC and Windows development coming. It came out in June 22nd of 2023, and I just want to read a little bit about what the game is about. So Final Fantasy 16 is set in the fictional world of Valisthea. Scattered throughout the 2 continents of Ash and Storm are colossal magical crystals known as the Mother Crystals, which provide ether energy to the various populations and drive civilization with shards for mind and commercial use. There are also humans that can use magic without crystals, known as bearers, who are subject to prejudice and slavery, their overuse causing them to gradually petrify. A powerful force in Valisthea are the Icons, magical creatures of incredible power that are utilized by hosts called Dominants. There are 8 Icons, 1 for each of the elements: Phoenix for fire, Shiva for ice, Ramu for thunder, Leviathan for water, Titan for earth, Garuda for wind, Odin for darkness, and Bahamut for light, and then a seemingly impossible second icon of fire, Ifrit, which drives the main plot of disrupting this balance. I wanted to point that out because Final Fantasy 16 isn't the 16th following a chronological story. Every Final Fantasy is different, so that just kind of puts in context of what this one is about. And I think what this one really did is take this franchise back to a more traditional medieval type of sword and magic, which I think,
like that.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people were kind of demanding and really wanting, which, again, after games like Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 15, not saying any of those games are bad, but I think they were slowly kind of taking Final Fantasy just in a different direction, which is perfectly fine. That's the whole point of what Final Fantasy does. So after games like that, I think the audience was kind of going back to kind of more of that traditional Final Fantasy 1 type style, just obviously with updated graphics, and I love that it's, on the PS5 exclusive, not so much exclusive, but on next gen hardware, because it really shines. And the story is, which is a really great story once you start playing it, but they turn it into a very epic type of game. So one of the biggest things that I know Final Fantasy 16 was being criticized for was the fact that it changed up the party system and grouping up system, and kind of more turning it into I wouldn't want to call it like a linear, but more of a narrative story told from Clive's point of view, which I actually really ended up liking, because once you start getting into these epic boss fights, they definitely feel a lot more personal, because you are following the story of just one person who has a couple people team up with them here and there. Like, you'll have Jill and Torgal and Sid kind of join your party here and there, but you are following this really in-depth story of Clive and everything he goes through with his brother Joshua, and how he has to deal with all these other people in all these other different kind of countries. So yeah, when you are getting into fights with Hugo and Benedicta and Barnabas, it definitely feels a lot more personal, which is what I think this Final Fantasy does, which stands out from a lot of the other ones. The other big thing, and I was trying to show you earlier, but we didn't get a lot of time, was that the music was, not only is it awesome, every Final Fantasy has awesome music, but it was paired really well with these boss fights, because one of the things that allows you to do when you're playing it by yourself is you fight these big icons, and it's kind of these one-on-one kind of kaiju type battles. So for me, I know a lot of people were kind of angry about it, but in my mind, I'm like, how else would you do it? You've got to, the way they were able to reformat the combat, for me, I really personally like, because it did kind of turn more into people want to call it like a hack and slash, like a Devil May Cry, but I think there was a lot more to it. There's a lot more synergy with how you want to do your gear and how you actually want to prepare your attacks. If you want to be in the front or if you want to be in the back, are you going to be using magic? So I think there was a little more complexity to it than a lot of people looked at the trailers, where it looks like it's just smashing the square button and smashing the X button. So with that being said, guys, Final Fantasy 16 was a fantastic game. It took me, I think I played it 3 days in a row, like 10, 15-hour sessions. I did do a really great spoiler cast with the guys over at The Brothers Take. We did an hour and a half on their podcast, on their YouTube channel, and then we have an hour and a half on our YouTube channel. So if you guys do want to see a more in-depth conversation about Final Fantasy 16, you can check both of those out. And I gotta say, Final Fantasy 16 for me was a true return to form. And I really cannot wait to see what they do. I don't know how fast they're going to pump out a Final Fantasy 17, now that we know that Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth is on its way, coming in like January or February. But I think they really nailed it, and it was an excellent addition to the overall Final Fantasy scope, because I know you played Final Fantasy 15 and you really enjoyed it, but there was just something that they were able to do different with 16 that I think got a lot more people back into the seats. And again, what I like is that they always keep trying something new, and it doesn't necessarily always work. But for my money, I thought Final Fantasy 16, what it did it excellent. So that is why for me it makes my number 2. So
I'm holding out hope that it still comes out to Xbox. It says exclusivity till 12/31/23, so we're hoping.
Hey, we're holding out hope. So guys, 2s are done. Let's move into our final number 1s.
Excuse me. So my final game of my game of the year is going to be Lies of P. Now, if you watch the show, you probably heard me gushing about this game because that's all I seem to be doing about it. Because I am totally in love with this game. Now, it came out September 19th. It was developed and published by developed by NeoWiz Games and Round 8 Studio, but also published by NeoWiz Games. They did that themselves. Now, I think that this game personally is a masterpiece. Now, that's not, I don't mean masterpieces in it's flawless. The game does have like a few flaws, but when you just take everything about this game, it's so magical. And I think to take into perspective as well is this game is not just a Souls clone. I wouldn't call it that. It has so much heart. It's its own thing. I would call it Souls-like, but I would never just call this game, oh, that's just another Souls clone. I played a few other Souls clones where I'm like, dude, this is just not... And I love Dark Souls. I love Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Sekiro, all of them. I played other games that are supposed to be like them that obviously have taken pages from them. I'm like, this just ain't it. This does not feel good to me. Yeah, and I'm just like, I don't like this. I absolutely love this game. It has so much heart. And I think even one of my favorite things, too, that even takes something different is the combat from the combat. Because when you're playing, it is like Dark Souls where you have these big weapons, small weapons. But what you can do with them is you can mix and match the handles with what is essentially the blade. So, like, you find the wrench and it comes with, like, a tiny handle. And the wrench head is, like, one of the stronger weapons in the game. I put it with like this weird cutlass pirate sword to where it makes it stronger and you like spin in circles and it changes your attack.
Oh, that's cool.
But you can take it and put it on like a long pole if you want to stay further from enemies and have the wrench head, and now you're attacking like this or like side swiping, and there's even special moves that you can do. It'll change what the special does. Cool. And so you can take like this big burly blade and put it on a tiny handle. Or if maybe your problem is that you get messed up because you're not good with the parry system, that you want to keep your distance, they give you stuff for that. Again, like you put it on the long pole with the long blade, and so now you're just sticking and poking and trying to keep
I know that game.
And trying to keep that from there. I think one of my favorite things about this is I've said it before, I personally didn't care about Pinocchio. It's an okay story to me. What they've done with revitalizing the story and changing it and how it plays in here, you play as Pinocchio and you're going through this world where puppets were almost used like iRobot. They're just used as like butlers and servants and stuff like that. But they've turned on humans who are also trying to fight off like a plague at the same time. So you're going through where people are weary of you because they know you're a puppet. And then to take it even further is it takes that classic story of Pinocchio where instead of lying, it being a bad thing, if you tell the truth, you kind of just stay like ideally like a puppet through the whole story. And I like the idea that if you lie, that's where he kind of grows more of his emotion and you start learning what it is to be human. Because that is like, I even went and like Googled it afterwards. I was like, is lying like a human thing? Like, do animals do stuff like that? And the most I could find is like, an anglerfish obviously lies by using its angle. That's not really what it is, but that's not lying.
Yeah, that's tricks for food and shit.
Yeah, so that's really, I'm like, man, to think that that's a human construct and that is what is making you human in this game, a beautiful idea. I thought it was really good. I loved all the NPCs from Aladoro to Vanini to you even meet this other person who's a serial killer that kills his other person's parents, and it sets into motion his whole life and what he contributes to the place of crime. It's a beautiful setting. It's almost like I would say it's like a mixture of somewhere in like Europe or like France, even medieval kind of. It has some of my favorite bosses in the game, like the Puppet King, or if you watch our other episode where we were answering questions, one of them is who's our favorite boss. Mine for the year was Laxasia, the complete, beautiful design, absolutely hard and brutal the way it was intended to be, but it was just so good, and the feeling of beating them, again, it gave me that Souls feeling of like, man, like I just overcame this mountain, and I feel so good after I beat it. I'm almost wanting to throw the control and be like, dude, that's it, like just,
nice little rage quitter.
And I think one of my favorite things about this game, I did go through and 100% it, is when you go through and play it on New Game Plus, there's lots of little subtle things. So when you're fighting some of these bosses, they're speaking a language that you can't understand. And I don't want to spoil the story of what they're saying, but when you go through it and play it on a new game, because you do know the ending now, you'll see what they're actually saying, and it totally changes your perspective of the story. And you can even almost attest this a little bit, because I told you the ending, and I showed you the little scene from the beginning of Romeo the Puppet King that alludes to something. You just think he's shit-talking you, but really he's trying to help you out and allude to what's going to happen later on.
Very cool.
Or possibly happen. I'm like, dude, it totally changes the way that I look at that game when I'm playing it through New Game Plus. That if you haven't tried it, get out there. It is on Game Pass. That was the only reason I tried it. This was a game I was totally going to sleep on. I didn't even like it at first, but once I kind of gave in and gave it a few hours, I'm like, okay, this is it, and it clicked for me. I absolutely love this game.
Excellent, my man. Excellent. So, guys, my number one game for the year, and it was really tough switching it between Final Fantasy 16 and this game, but eventually I ended up landing on Spider-Man 2, which is a 2023 action-adventure game developed by Insomniac Games and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. It came out on October 20th, exclusive to the PS5, and I just wanted to kind of read this real quick, because Spider-Man they have number 1, which was an amazing game, and then they kind of had the 1.5, which was the Miles Morales game, and then Spider-Man 2, which is finally the game that brings both of them together. You actually get to play both of them. So the gameplay builds on the foundation established by its predecessors, with an emphasis on the multiple playstyles afforded by Peter Parker and Miles Morales as Spider-Man. The game expands on their existing traversal and combat abilities, including new web-based gadgets and suits that can be unlocked through progressing in the story. It also introduces the former Spider-Man symbiote suit, granting Parker unique abilities from his previous playable appearance. As with the prior games, content outside the main story consists of completing side missions and obtaining collectibles dispersed throughout the game's open world, with the player able to switch between Parker and Morales to complete dedicated objectives for each of them. And yeah, I gotta say, that was kind of the biggest thing that I think made this game special and really unique compared to the other two, is that the game, because when the trailer was coming out, a lot of the question was, okay, well, how is it going to be? Is it just going to be certain missions for him, certain missions for Miles? And you ended up being able yes and no. There were certain things that you had to do with each character, but generally speaking, you could accomplish most of the open world missions with either character. And I got to say, for me, this is on par, if not surpasses, one of the best comic book series games, because obviously its biggest rival is going to be the Arkham trilogy. And again, you wouldn't have a Spider-Man without the Arkham, so I know the nod is there. But for me, it was just so cool seeing Spider-Man being better and better each time you get to play it. And the fact that you get to play with these two protagonists just makes their connection better for each of their story, because they each have this kind of dark, deep, rich storyline. And it's almost like you're getting two games in one, because Miles' stuff is just as compelling as Peter Parker's stuff. And with this game, obviously, you're going to see newer villains. So Kraven was a really cool villain that they introduced in this game. One of the more memorable scenes, that I know they showed it off a lot for trailers, was fighting the Lizard. Sandman being one of the opening fights in this game. If you've got a PS5, check it out, because Sandman's opening fight scene is probably one of the coolest fights I've got to fight in all year. But obviously we got a chance to witness Venom, and Venom is the character that everybody is probably familiar with, even if you don't read or watch anything that's Spider-Man. And it was really interesting, because you get to see Venom in a new way. He has a new origin story, and in a modern day where we live with a bunch of new movies and new comics, that's a hard thing to do, is to make up a new origin story. And the game was actually able to do it, and do it in a very cool way. This game, for being a PS5 exclusive, also sold extremely well. On the list I was looking at, I think it's number 4 out of the best-selling games of 2023. And I do got to say, with this story, it does get a lot darker than the first two. Peter, obviously, with the Venom interaction, goes down a very dark spiral. and starts kind of shunning Miles. Miles, from his point of view, you start seeing him get depressed and feel like he's not needed as much. And then it also dives into, you get some more player background. Like when Harry Osborn gets introduced, you get to see through all the things he's going through. There's a really interesting scene with Mary Jane. You get to see kind of how her depression and her darkness is kind of kicking in. So, well, with that being said, I do got to say the difference of what they did with Spider-Man when they added the suit feels very separate from the other Spider-Man and from the other previous games. And I was curious how they're going to make him on par with Miles, because Miles technically is kind of the stronger fighter. He's got a lot more different moves. He's got the bioelectricity. He's got the invisibility. So he was kind of, in my mind, dwarfing Peter Parker. But once you get the symbiote in the game, he becomes a whole different character, and he's so much more fun to play. The map, I don't want to say doubles in size, but it definitely gets bigger from the original one. They add a lot more burrows and things like that. So there's no one, I believe, that can even argue that this game has not only the best traversal system, because it's fun. It's constant swinging around. You're doing all kinds of cool moves. They added the wings now where you can kind of paraglide through the different alleys and through the different streets. But when you do the quick travel system, which is always controversial in games. Some of them have really good ones, some of them have shitty ones. This one, hands down, has the best one, where the moment you click it, it just automatically puts you right in there and you're already moving around. So this game, for me, I mean, it didn't stop. This game was a lot of fun. It's got excellent combat, it's got excellent visuals, it's got an excellent storyline. So at the end of the day, when I had to edge out between that and Final Fantasy 16, and again, I would argue that I'm more of a comic book fan than I would be a pure Final Fantasy fan. So for me, just seeing comic book video games get better and better, and this one for me being the benchmark of the best, at the end of the day, Spider-Man 2 ended up being my #1 game of the year. So with that being said, Andrew, let's recap our 5 through 1. My 5 was Hi-Fi Rush. My number 4 was Hogwarts Legacy. My number 3 was Bramble the Mountain King. My number 2 was Final Fantasy 16. And my #1 game of 2023 was Spider-Man 2.
My 5 was Starfield. Number 4 was Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Number 3 was Mortal Kombat 1. My number 2 was Resident Evil 4 Remake. And then my #1 game of the year was Lies of P.
Nice. Now, I did want to give a couple of shout-outs. Andrew and I each wrote down a couple games that we wanted to give a shout-out. So, and also, just if you haven't played the games we're going to give a shout-out to, definitely check these out, because these almost made the list. My first one was Dead Space Remake. Excellent game. Phenomenal. Had a lot of fun with it. It was my first entry into Dead Space. I never played the originals. So for me, it was fantastic. It's one of the few games that I know all my friends in my immediate circle played. Absolutely love it. It was almost going to beat out Hi-Fi Rush, but for me, Hi-Fi Rush just did a little bit more. My second game I want to give a shout out to was Sea of Stars. Excellent RPG. And then my third game I wanted to give a shout out was Immortals of Avium. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this game. It's a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I mean, the numbers showed that not everybody showed up for it. But if you get a chance to it, because I know it's going to be on sale, give Immortals of Avium a shot.
I wrote down a couple here too. I put down Star Wars Jedi Survivor. That was actually a really good game that I think got kind of overlooked. It was so good that, I mean, on the right day, I could easily put it up here in the top 5, like anywhere. Another one that I put down that a lot of people played, but then we kind of just fell off, but it was so much fun, was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, I had so much fun playing that, especially with my friends, playing that with you, just our little group. Sometimes we would just play against other random people. Other times we would have like enough people to fill up a lobby ourselves, and we would just switch positions every time and still have just as much fun hunting each other as you do trying to hunt strangers. And then the last one I wrote, I put down like a little 2-piece. It'd be either Like a Dragon Ishin or Man Who Erased His Name. So any of you guys have followed those Yakuza games, both of those are really good this year. One, again, is like a remake from a classic PlayStation game. The other was just meant to be kind of like a bite-sized little portion between when Like a Dragon 8 comes out. Either way, I had just as good a time playing either of them. So I think I would, if you're interested, get out there and play either of them.
Nice. So guys, that is our top 5 games of 2023. If you guys are watching on the YouTube video, make sure you leave the comments down below what your top 5 games of 2023 were. So guys, until our next episode, my name is Craig Perales. This is Mandrew Montgomery, guys. Cheers.
See you in 2024.